Every night you lie down in your bed, close your eyes, and within minutes you vanish. The person you've been all day, with all your memories, concerns, plans, and identity, dissolves completely. Your sense of being a separate self in a physical body disappears. Your awareness of the external world ceases. For all practical purposes, you die. Then, several hours later, you're reborn, waking up as if returning from a journey to another realm. This isn't poetic metaphor or mystical speculation. According to Tibetan Buddhism, sleep is a nightly rehearsal for death, and the transition you make every single night between waking and sleeping is fundamentally identical to the transition you'll make between life and death. If you're ready to discover why Tibetan masters consider sleep the most important spiritual practice you'll ever undertake, and how mastering the nightly death can prepare you for the final one, then subscribe to this channel now and turn on notifications, because this ancient secret could transform both how you sleep and how you'll die. Think about what happens when you fall asleep. You don't remain conscious of lying in bed. You don't maintain continuous awareness of your body's position or the room around you. There's a gap, a discontinuity, a moment when waking consciousness ends. What happens in that gap? Where do you go? From a materialist perspective, consciousness simply switches off like a light, your brain entering different states of reduced activity. But Tibetan Buddhism, drawing on centuries of careful observation by meditation masters who've learned to remain aware through this transition, tells a different story. Consciousness doesn't switch off. It transforms. It withdraws from the gross physical senses and enters a subtle realm where experience continues but follows different rules. This is the dream bardo, one of the 6 bardos or intermediate states that structure all of existence. The Tibetan word bardo means gap or interval, an in-between state. While most people associate bardos only with death, Tibetan Buddhism identifies 6 distinct bardos, and 3 of them occur during your ordinary life. The first is the bardo of this life, your waking existence from birth to death. The second is the dream bardo, the state you enter every night when you sleep. The third is the meditation bardo, the state of deep meditative absorption. Each of these bardos has its own characteristics, its own rules, its own opportunities for awakening. And understanding the dream bardo is considered essential preparation for navigating the 3 death bardos. The bardo of dying, the bardo of dharmata, when consciousness experiences visions of its own luminous nature, and the bardo of becoming, where consciousness seeks rebirth. Why is the dream bardo considered a practiced death? Because the dissolution that occurs when you fall asleep mirrors the dissolution that occurs when you die. In both cases, consciousness withdraws from the physical senses in a specific sequence. First, the sense of solid embodiment begins to fade. You stop feeling the weight of your body pressing into the mattress. Then the sense of the external environment dissolves. You're no longer aware of sounds in your room, the temperature, the feeling of sheets against your skin. Your awareness of being a physical body in a physical location disappears entirely. At a certain point in this dissolution, there's a gap, a moment of darkness or unknowing. This is the moment of falling asleep, and it precisely parallels the moment of death when consciousness separates from the body. What happens after this gap is remarkable. A new world appears, seemingly external and real. You find yourself in locations that seem as solid and objective as your waking environment. You interact with people and objects. You experience emotions, sometimes more intensely than in waking life. You have a body that feels real, that can move through space, that responds to dream events. Yet none of this has any material existence outside your consciousness. The entire dream world, including your dream body and all the beings and objects you encounter, is a spontaneous creation of your own mind. This reveals something profound. Consciousness has the inherent capacity to generate entire worlds of experience without any external input whatsoever. Tibetan Buddhism teaches that this creative capacity of consciousness doesn't suddenly appear when you fall asleep. It's always operating even during waking life. But you don't notice it because you believe the waking world exists independently of your perception. Dreams make the creative nature of consciousness obvious because you can verify upon waking that the dream world wasn't objectively real. But the same principle applies to all experience. What you call the external world is actually an appearance within consciousness, shaped by your perceptual apparatus, your conditioning, your karma, and the creative activity of mind itself. Dreams are just more obviously mental creations than waking experience, which makes them perfect training grounds for recognizing the nature of mind. If you're discovering insights that challenge how you understand reality, please like this video to share this teaching with others. Here's where the teaching becomes even more profound. Not only is falling asleep like dying, but the dream state itself mirrors the after-death bardos. According to Tibetan Buddhism, when you die and consciousness separates from the physical body, you don't immediately take rebirth. There's an intermediate period traditionally described as lasting up to 49 days. Though time in the Bardo doesn't correspond precisely to earthly time. During this Bardo period, consciousness exists in a subtle body made of mental energy rather than physical matter. In this subtle body, you experience a series of visions and appearances. Peaceful and wrathful deities manifest. Lights of different colors appear. You encounter deceased relatives and spiritual figures. You experience being drawn toward different realms of rebirth. All of these appearances, according to the teachings, are projections of your own mind, manifestations of your karmic tendencies and habitual mental patterns taking visible form. This is exactly what happens in dreams. Your dream experiences are projections of your own mental content taking apparent form as people, places, and events. The monsters that chase you in nightmares are externalizations of your own fears. The people you meet are often aspects of your own psyche in disguise. The landscapes you traverse reflect your emotional states and subconscious preoccupations. Dreams show you what the Bardo teachings describe, that consciousness, when freed from the constraints of physical embodiment, spontaneously creates experiential worlds from its own content. Learning to recognize this in dreams prepares you to recognize it in the after-death bardos. If you can become lucid in a dream, recognizing that you're dreaming while the dream is still happening, you're developing the exact capacity you'll need in the death bardos, the ability to recognize appearances as mental projections rather than solid realities. This is why Tibetan Buddhism places such emphasis on dream yoga, the practice of working with dreams as spiritual training. Dream yoga has several progressive stages, each building capacities that will be crucial when you die. The first stage is developing dream recall. Most people remember few of their dreams or remember them only vaguely. But if you're going to use dreams as practice, you need to remember them clearly. The simple practice of keeping a dream journal, writing down whatever you remember immediately upon waking, significantly improves dream recall within weeks. As recall improves, you begin to notice the dream world in greater detail, treating it as a realm worthy of attention rather than dismissing it as meaningless mental noise. The second stage is achieving lucid dreams, moments when you recognize you're dreaming while still in the dream. This recognition is transformative. The moment you realize you're dreaming, the dream doesn't necessarily end. You remain in the dream environment, but your relationship to it changes completely. You know that the apparent solidity of dream objects is illusory, that the apparent dangers aren't real threats, that the apparent limitations don't actually bind you. This knowledge liberates you to explore the dream with curiosity, rather than react to it with fear or desire. Many people spontaneously achieve occasional lucid dreams, but dream yoga involves training to achieve lucidity regularly and maintain it for extended periods. There are several techniques for inducing lucid dreams. One classical method is performing reality checks throughout the day. Several times each day, pause and seriously ask yourself, "Am I dreaming right now?" Then perform a test. Try to push your finger through your palm or look at text, look away. Then look back to see if it's changed. In waking reality, your finger won't pass through your palm and text remains stable. In dreams, these things often behave strangely. By making this questioning a daytime habit, you eventually perform the same check in a dream, discover that you are dreaming, and become lucid. Another technique is setting a strong intention before sleep, repeatedly telling yourself that you will recognize your dreaming. A third method is waking during the night after 4 or 5 hours of sleep, staying awake for 20 to 30 minutes while focusing on the intention to become lucid, then returning to sleep. This often produces lucid dreams during the subsequent REM periods. Share in the comments. Have you ever experienced a lucid dream? What was it like? The third stage of dream yoga is learning to control and transform dream content once you're lucid. When you first become lucid, you might wake up immediately from the excitement. As you develop stability and lucidity, you can begin to experiment with the dream environment. You can fly, walk through walls, transform frightening figures into allies, or visit specific locations. This isn't mere entertainment, though it can certainly be enjoyable. The point is to viscerally demonstrate to yourself that these apparently solid, objective experiences are actually malleable mental creations. When you transform a nightmare monster into a Buddha figure through pure intention, or when you fly simply by deciding to fly, you're proving to yourself at a level deeper than intellectual understanding that mind creates these experiences. This recognition prepares you for the death bardos, where the same principle applies but the stakes are much higher. The fourth and most advanced stage of dream yoga is called clear light dreaming. This is the practice of maintaining awareness through the dissolution of the dream itself. Most people have no awareness of the transition from dream to dreamless sleep, or from dreamless sleep to the next dream. There are gaps of unconsciousness between dreams. But advanced practitioners train to remain aware through these gaps, experiencing what's called the clear light of sleep, a state of luminous awareness without content. This is considered directly analogous to the clear light that appears at the moment of death, a flash of pristine awareness before the Bardo visions begin. If you can recognize and rest in the clear light during sleep, you're training for the most important moment of death, the opportunity to recognize the fundamental nature of mind and achieve liberation without traversing the subsequent bardos at all. Modern neuroscience has begun to validate aspects of these ancient teachings, particularly regarding the parallels between sleep and death. Research on the dying brain has revealed something remarkable. Scientists studying patients who died while connected to EEG monitoring discovered that in the moments after cardiac arrest, when the heart has stopped and breathing has ceased, there's often a surge of high-frequency brain activity, particularly gamma waves associated with heightened consciousness, focused attention, and sensory processing. In some cases, this surge of activity occurred minutes after clinical death, during a period when materialist neuroscience would predict the brain should be shutting down. One patient showed a sustained spike in gamma wave activity and increased connectivity between brain regions for nearly 4 minutes after the heart stopped. These findings align remarkably with Tibetan descriptions of what happens at death. The teachings describe a period after breathing stops when consciousness remains present, experiencing what's called the inner dissolution. During this phase, which can last from minutes to hours, subtler levels of consciousness are dissolving, progressing toward the clear light experience. The brain activity surges that science is detecting may correspond to these inner dissolution stages. Even more striking, the types of brain waves detected, particularly gamma oscillations in areas associated with conscious experience, are the same wave patterns that correlate with deep meditation states and moments of insight in living meditators. It's as if the dying brain enters a hyperconscious state rather than simply fading to unconsciousness. Similar patterns occur during sleep. Recent studies tracking brain activity throughout the night show that the transition from waking to sleeping isn't a simple decrease in activity. Different brain regions activate and deactivate in complex sequences. The default mode network, associated with self-referential thinking and the sense of being a separate self, decreases in activity. The thalamus, which gates sensory information, reduces input from external senses, but other areas become more active, particularly regions involved in memory consolidation, emotional processing, and internally generated imagery. During REM sleep, when most vivid dreaming occurs, the brain is nearly as active as during waking, but the pattern of activity is different, with visual and emotional centers highly active while regions associated with logical reasoning and external orientation are relatively quiet. The Tibetan teachings describe sleep and death using similar language. Both involve the gross level of consciousness withdrawing, allowing subtler levels to become manifest. In both sleep and death, the ordinary sense of being an embodied self in a physical location dissolves, replaced by experiences that follow different rules. In both cases, there are opportunities to recognize the nature of mind that are harder to access during ordinary waking consciousness because waking consciousness is so thoroughly convinced of its own narratives and perceptions. Sleep and death are windows into the true nature of mind, opportunities to see what's always present but usually obscured. This understanding has profound practical implications. If you die every night, then every night is an opportunity to practice for death. But most people sleep unconsciously, missing this opportunity entirely. You lose awareness as you fall asleep, remain unconscious through dreamless sleep. And even in dreams, you're usually completely identified with the dream experience, reacting to dream events as if they were real. This is exactly how most people will experience death. Unconsciously, confused, reacting to Bardo visions as if they were objective realities rather than projections of mind. But it doesn't have to be this way. You can train to die consciously by learning to sleep consciously. The simplest practice is maintaining awareness up to the moment of falling asleep. Most people's last conscious memory each night is lying in bed thinking or trying to fall asleep. Then there's a gap. Then they're waking up in the morning or finding themselves in a dream. The gap is the moment of falling asleep, and it's usually completely unconscious. But you can train to catch this moment. As you lie in bed preparing for sleep, maintain gentle awareness of your breath or body sensations. Don't try to stay awake, but don't let awareness lapse into unconsciousness either. At some point, you'll notice hypnagogic imagery appearing, strange patterns or vague scenes that mark the transition into sleep. If you can maintain awareness through this imagery without either fully waking or losing consciousness, you'll experience the actual moment of falling asleep. You'll feel the dissolution of waking consciousness and the emergence of the dream state, remaining aware throughout the transition. This practice is challenging. Your habit is to either engage with the hypnagogic imagery and lose awareness, or to notice it and immediately wake up. Finding the middle way, remaining aware but relaxed through the transition, takes practice. But even brief successes are profound. You directly experience that consciousness doesn't cease at sleep but transforms, withdrawing from one mode and entering another. This experiential knowledge reduces fear of death, because you've proven to yourself that consciousness can survive major transitions. You've died every night of your life, and consciousness has continued. Why would the final death be different? From the Tibetan Buddhist perspective, death is simply a bigger version of what happens every night when you fall asleep. Another powerful practice is setting intention before sleep. The last thoughts before sleep influence the quality of sleep and dreams. If you fall asleep watching disturbing news or thinking about problems, your sleep and dreams will reflect that agitation. But if you fall asleep with a spiritual intention, that intention seeds the night. Traditional Tibetan practitioners often visualize themselves in the heart of their meditation deity, or imagine their meditation teacher at their crown or throat, then fall asleep holding that visualization. This practice blesses the sleep, making it more likely that positive dreams occur and that the clear light of sleep is recognized. Even without visualization practice, simply setting a clear intention can be powerful. Before sleep, think or say aloud something like, "May I remain aware throughout sleep. May I recognize I'm dreaming when dreams occur. May I use this nightly death as practice for the final death." This intention plants a seed in your subconscious that can manifest as increased lucidity and awareness during the night. Please share this video with someone who would benefit from understanding sleep as spiritual practice. Tibetan Buddhism also teaches practices specifically for dreamless sleep, the deep sleep state where even dreams don't occur. Western science identifies this as non-REM stage 3 sleep, characterized by delta brainwaves and essential for physical restoration. From a Tibetan perspective, deep dreamless sleep is when consciousness comes closest to its fundamental nature, beyond all content, resting in pure awareness. Most people are completely unconscious during deep sleep, but highly advanced practitioners can maintain a subtle thread of awareness even in these depths. This requires years of meditation training and is considered extremely difficult, but even beginning practitioners can set the intention to remain present during deep sleep. The intention itself, even if not fully actualized, begins to change your relationship to sleep, making it less of a blackout and more of a conscious rest. Upon waking is another crucial moment. How you transition from sleep to waking creates momentum for the entire day. Many people reach for their phone immediately upon waking, jumping directly from sleep into reactive engagement with emails and news. This is spiritually wasteful. The first moments after waking, when you're still close to the sleep state, offer special access to dream memories and the quality of consciousness from the night. Tibetan practitioners are taught to remain still upon waking, gently reviewing the night. Did you dream? Can you recall any dreams? Were there moments of lucidity or special clarity? How does your mind feel in this fresh waking state? This review honors sleep as a significant part of your spiritual practice rather than dismissing it as mere unconscious downtime. It also improves dream recall, because you're training your mind to bridge the gap between sleeping and waking consciousness, rather than treating them as completely separate domains. The teaching that you die every night isn't meant to be disturbing, but liberating. It reveals that the terrifying unknown of death is actually something you experience constantly. You've successfully navigated this transition thousands of times. Each morning you wake up proves that consciousness survives major dissolution and regeneration. This doesn't mean there's a permanent self that continues, which would contradict the teaching of a Natman or no self that we explored earlier. Rather, it means there's a continuity of the consciousness stream, a causal flow that persists through transitions. What you call yourself is more like a river than a rock, a process rather than a thing, and that process continues through sleep, through dreams, through death, and into whatever comes next. Understanding this changes your relationship to mortality. Death stops being the ultimate catastrophe, the unthinkable end that you desperately avoid contemplating. It becomes instead the next major transition, unknown in its details but not fundamentally different from transitions you've already experienced. You've died every night of your life and awakened in a new state. The final death will involve awakening into a different kind of state, the Bardo experience. But the basic pattern is familiar. And if you've trained in dream yoga, learning to maintain awareness and recognize appearances as mind-created, you'll have exactly the skills you need to navigate the after-death bardos with clarity and purpose. There's also a profound implication for how you live right now. If you die every night, then every evening when you go to sleep is potentially the last time you'll experience this life as you know it. You might not wake up. Every night carries a small probability of physical death during sleep. But even if you wake in the morning, the person who wakes won't be exactly the same as the person who went to sleep. Memories will have been consolidated or lost. Your body will have changed. Your mood will be different. The you of yesterday has died, and a closely related but not identical you has been born. Taking this seriously makes each day precious. What would you do differently today if you knew you would die tonight? What conversations would you have? What would you let go of? What would you make time for? These aren't morbid questions, but invitations to live with awareness of impermanence, which paradoxically makes life more vivid and meaningful rather than depressing it. The Tibetan Buddhist tradition developed an entire category of meditation practices called death contemplation, or maranasati in Sanskrit. These practices involve regularly contemplating your mortality, visualizing your death, and meditating on impermanence. To Western minds, this might seem morbid or depressing, but practitioners report the opposite effect. Contemplating death doesn't make you sad or nihilistic. It makes you present, grateful, and focused on what actually matters. When you deeply absorb that this body will die, that everyone you know will die, that everything you've built will eventually dissolve, you stop postponing authentic living. You stop wasting time on trivialities and resentments. You tell people you love them. You take risks on meaningful projects. You forgive. You let go. Death contemplation isn't about becoming obsessed with death, but about letting the reality of death inform how you live. The nightly death of sleep offers a gentle version of death contemplation. Each night you practice letting go of everything: your identity, your concerns, your body, your world. You surrender to the unknown, allowing consciousness to dissolve and reconfigure. Each morning you practice being born, returning to embodiment, remembering who you are, taking up your life again. These transitions happen so regularly that you take them for granted, but they're profound opportunities. You're rehearsing the ultimate letting go and the mystery of what comes after. Bringing awareness to this rehearsal makes the final performance less frightening. We've explored one of Tibetan Buddhism's most provocative and practical teachings, that you die every night when you fall asleep, and that this nightly death is both a rehearsal for physical death and an opportunity for spiritual awakening. Sleep isn't unconscious downtime, but a Bardo state where consciousness withdraws from gross materiality and operates according to subtler laws. Dreams reveal mind's capacity to create entire worlds from its own content, previewing what happens in the after-death bardos. Dream yoga trains you to recognize this creative process, becoming lucid in dreams and maintaining awareness through sleep transitions. Modern neuroscience is beginning to validate these ancient insights, finding that both dying and sleeping involve complex reorganizations of consciousness rather than simple cessation. Every night is an opportunity to practice conscious dying, and every morning is an opportunity to practice conscious rebirth. Understanding this makes both sleep and death less frightening and more sacred, transforming 1/3 of your life from unconscious void into spiritual practice. What has been your experience of the transition into sleep? Have you ever maintained awareness as you fell asleep? Share your experiences in the comments below, and let's learn from each other's explorations of these nightly journeys. If this teaching has changed how you understand sleep and death, subscribe to this channel for more profound wisdom from Tibetan Buddhism that addresses the deepest questions of human existence. And please share this video with anyone who fears death or who wants to transform their sleep from wasted time into spiritual practice. May you die consciously every night and awaken with clarity every morning, and may this training serve you well when the final death arrives. Sleep well tonight, knowing that you're practicing for the greatest journey of all.